Welcome to my Accent is No Accident podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Perez, and we are here today with a woman that loves world traveling, and her passion is storytelling. She's Bibi LeBlanc, the coloring book lady. Bibi LeBlanc is an entrepreneur and world traveler with a passion for storytelling and creating community. Born and raised in West Berlin during the Cold War, she achieved and received the education in business administration before embarking on a career as a flight attendant. After marrying and moving to Florida, she raised three sons while nurturing her entrepreneurial spirit. As the founder and CEO of Culture of Color, she uses her experiences to create explainer coloring books for businesses, organizations, and destinations, bringing the beauty and diversity of the world to new audiences. She is the #1 Amazon bestseller and has won numerous book awards. With her camera as her loyal companion, Bibi travels the world seeking out new people and cultures, always eager to hear their stories and create connections. Welcome, Bibi. It is an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Maritza. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm very, very happy. I love what you do and the purpose that you put on every single book. But before we get into our theme and our interview, I would like to ask you a question.
Okay.
Bibi, what is your accent and why is not an accident?
My accent is from Germany. I grew up in Berlin during the Cold War, and I married when I was 26 and moved to the US then. So that's now more than 30 years ago that I moved here. So, but I still have that German accent. Some people think it sounds Scandinavian, but it's German.
Awesome. But it's very it has blend a little. Do you think?
Good. Yeah. Good. Well, yeah, I tried to, but
Yes.
whenever it seems like when I travel and come back, it's a little stronger again. I don't know if you find that too, right? Yeah.
Yes, I find that out too. That
Yeah.
So when I am among people from Colombia and we are speaking Spanish, and I come back to speak English, it's like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Baby, tell me a little bit of that part of your growing up in West Berlin during the Cold War and your transitioning to your career, and tell me about your life.
Okay, that's like 45 years in a nutshell. Yes, so I was born in the American sector of West Berlin. And when I tell people that, they get big eyes and they're like, what does that even mean? So I have to explain history a little bit. 1945, World War II had ended, Germany had lost, and the winning Allied countries, the US, England, France, and the Soviet Union, divided Germany into 4 zones of occupation. So you had the American sector, the British, the French, the Soviet sector. And Berlin was the capital, was also divided by those winning Allied countries. And so you had East Berlin, which was the Soviet sector, and then West Berlin, which was the French, British, and US allies.
Okay.
So I was born in the American sector of West Berlin. So that's where that comes from. So, and a lot of people don't realize, they've heard about the wall, but they don't realize that it wasn't built until 1961. So there was a long time between the war ending in 45 and the wall being built in 61. But they built it, the Soviets and the East Germans built it to both physically and ideologically divide Berlin and Germany. And they built it because a lot of people from the Soviet sector were leaving, because you could, before the wall was built, you could go back and forth. It wasn't really easy. They had checkpoints and stuff, but you could leave and go back and forth. But by the time I was born, 2 years after the wall was built, you know, I was in like an island city, basically, that was surrounded by a wall. And growing up, I very acutely felt that. So there were streets where you could see the houses on the other side, but we couldn't cross the street because the wall was there. And we couldn't just drive out of the city to the countryside and see, you know, fields and pastures and horses and stuff. And we were very contained in there. Now, Berlin is a very green city, so it wasn't all bad, but it made traveling difficult too, because to get out of Berlin, you always had to travel through the Soviet sector to get to West Germany, and either by car or plane, and then there would be checkpoints, and it was always a hassle, or by airplane, of course, but that wasn't as common as it is now. From like when I was growing up, I never flew because it was just too expensive, air travel. So we had family in East Berlin. My dad's brother and his family and my cousins lived in East Berlin, and we could apply for a day pass, which was a big process, a big to-do. And we could go over there. They had a few checkpoints, you know, along the line there, the dividing line, and we could go visit them, but they could never come visit us. And going through those checkpoints was always scary as a child, because like if we were traveling by car, first of all, you had to wait for a long time. And then when it was your turn, you had to turn in your ID. So then you were, you know, at their mercy. And then they had you get out of the car and they would lift up the back seats of the car. I don't think you can do that these days anymore. But they'd lift up the back seat. They had this long flexible rod that would stick in the gas tank to see if you were smuggling currency in there. And they had these little mirrors on wheels that they would push under the car to see if you were hiding and trying to smuggle anything over, because we weren't allowed to we could bring food and maybe some clothes, but for example, any printed material was considered capitalist propaganda. We could not bring anything over. And most things we couldn't, and definitely not currency. We had 2 separate currency, East and West Germany. And we had to exchange 25 West marks for 25 East marks, when on the black market, like the West mark was worth 10 times what the other one was worth. But we had to exchange it for each person that was traveling. And then at night, we could not exchange it back. And there wasn't a whole lot, other than maybe going out to eat. There wasn't a whole lot you could do with the money, because they didn't have a lot over there. You know, here we are so used to shelves being filled with, I don't know, 100 types of cookies and chips and whatnot. You know, they had one type of cookie, they had one type of mustard, and, you know, so very, very different. And so crossing that checkpoint was always scary, and especially knowing my dad would always try to smuggle something over made it even scarier, you know?
Yeah,
And
of
I
course.
remember,
She was probably concerned about your brother and his family, right?
Right. He wanted to treat them. He wanted to bring them stuff that they couldn't normally get, you know? And it was such scarcity. I remember one time we were waiting somewhere, and across the street there was a little store, and somebody set up a table outside, and before we knew what was happening, like within a matter of like 3 minutes, there was a line around the block because people knew he would be selling something that was different. They didn't even know what it was, but they got in line because they knew it would be different and special. So, scenes like that I remember vividly.
Yes.
And then it was always, ask a question.
Yeah, so yeah, I was like, it was, you were very little, you were a child when this happened. You were growing up in this, and it was like, obviously, the feeling of the adults, like suddenly their city is divided.
Yeah.
And some people did, and some people were on the opposite side.
Yeah. And at the time when that happened, because you could go back and forth, some people lived on one side and worked on the other side, or they went to school on the other side, or their family lived on the other side. Like there was a big housing shortage because Berlin was like 70% destroyed after World War II. There were still short of apartments and places to live. So families lived separated, some of them, So when they pulled up the wall the night of August 13th, 1961, some families were separated and would not be able to see each other and visit each other.
Goodness, this is
Yeah.
so hard.
Separated from your spouses, from your kids,
Yes.
Yeah.
From their family, and not knowing that, not by choice. I mean, you were
Yeah.
living in each side, not by choice.
Yeah. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what, that's what a dictator does. It tells you what to do, and that you don't have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and the wall, it was, I mean, in the first days, in most places, it was just barbed wire, but then very quickly they started building the wall and securing it. And you had watchtowers with sharpshooters sitting in them watching it. There was behind the wall, there was a strip of land with mines called the death strip. And they had dogs patrolling the wall, vicious dogs that they had to, when the wall came down, they had to put them down because they were so vicious they couldn't train them to be with people, so it was heavily guarded. And many people died trying to come over.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So it was like the Soviet side was definitely not able to cross to the west side.
Yeah.
But the west side could come and visit the Soviet.
Yes. After a while, not in the early days of the wall, but a little bit later. Yeah. It was a way, I think, for the East German government to get Western currency because that was so much stronger, and allowing visitors would allow them to get currency. That was one of the ways they did that.
Right.
And we knew that, like, the apartment my aunt and uncle and cousins lived in, we knew or suspected that it was bugged by the Stasi, the Department of State Security. And so we kids had to be careful, but the kids talk kid stuff, but the parents would have to go for walks outside if they wanted to talk freely because they knew it was bugged and they couldn't talk there, and it didn't take much to be to have an issue with the Stasi. Like if you listen, like my cousins, if they listen to American music, they could be, them or their parents could be taken in by the Stasi and incarcerated and basically tortured until they were willing to work with them as informants and spy on their family, on their neighbors, on their friends. And
these family, neighbors, and friends are just regular people that really don't have anything to do with the war or
right. But if you did the wrong thing, told a joke about the government or something, they could get you and make you sign all kinds of confessions and, like I said, work with them.
And
so you could never know who you can trust. I mean, imagine living in a world where you don't know if you can trust your parents or your best friend or your neighbors. I mean,
yeah, because they've been, and also they were not only paid. Some of them probably were paid, but I remember that some of them were like um were threatened to be killed, or their family will be killed if they don't do it.
Yeah. No, most people were not paid. They were just regular people like you and me, that did the wrong thing at some point, listened to a song or told a joke the government didn't like. And then I've been to one of those, there's a prison in Berlin, and I did a tour a couple of years ago, and they, in very much detail, explained how they coerced people into signing confessions and working with them. And it's really, it was torturous to some degree on a physical level, but also very mental.
How was it for a child to grow up like this? Because you just follow your parents and everything, but how was it like for you to grow up like this?
Well, as a child, you don't know any different, right? It's the world you live in. It is what it is, and you just deal with it like your parents are, and you follow their lead. And it's just, that was my world. I didn't know anything different, But I do know that I didn't like it growing up like this, and wanted to leave Berlin as soon as I could. And I did. As soon as I turned 18, finished high school, I left Berlin, West Germany. And I didn't think I would ever see that wall coming down in my lifetime, because it was that much part of my reality, right? And of my world, the world I lived in. And here we are, this year we'll celebrate the 35th anniversary of the fall of the wall. That was special times when that happened.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine that.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world.
Yeah.
I watched it on the news, on TV when it was.
Yeah. Do you remember watching that?
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was young.
Yeah.
I was young.
Yeah.
I was in my teens, and what year was it?
89. Sorry.
89.
Yeah, I was in 89.
Yeah, I was in my teen. I was 16.
Yeah.
So yes, but I remember we were crying in my house, like in celebrating and everything.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So you went to the university and you studied business administration?
No. Okay. So the educational system in Germany is a little bit different. I did not go to university.
Yes, I remember.
So, yeah.
Please talk to us about that. Yes.
So in Germany, there are 3 types of high schools, and only if you graduate from one university. But at the time, the grade levels to get in were very strict and like very high, and I wasn't anywhere close to that. And I didn't even know what I would have wanted to study at that point in my life. I wouldn't have known what I wanted to study. So most jobs you learn on the job in Germany. Like if you want to become a nurse, you go work in a hospital and they train you hands-on. And then, 1 day a week, or sometimes in blocks of weeks, you go to school to learn all the stuff you need to learn. But it's more of a hands-on approach than I think it is for a lot of jobs here in the US. So, and I think it's a good approach to teach kids, because they, have to work. It's physical work in a lot of cases. And I think it's a good approach. So that's how I learned business administration. I worked for a British pharmaceutical company in Germany for 2 years. I went through all the different departments that they had, the marketing, the accounting, the early days of IT. That was interesting. The computer took up a whole room. I remember that.
Yes.
And yeah, right. And so at that point in my life, I realized how much I enjoy talking to people and hearing their stories, because I went through all the different departments. Like every 4 or 6 weeks, I would meet a group of new people, right? And meet them and learn about them. And, and I really enjoyed that. When, as growing up as a teenager, I was always very shy. I would never raise my hand in school. When the teacher called on me, I'd blush, and, but that time I really enjoyed that. And yeah, then I stayed with the company for 6 months after that. And but I wanted to travel more. So I applied for a job as a flight attendant with Lufthansa, and they interviewed me, which I was really surprised, because they had very high standards, and I didn't expect to get in with them. I had applied with multiple ones, but they did, and they told me, you need to improve your English. So at that point, I had found a family in California that wanted to have me as an au pair for 6 months. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And so when they told me, yeah, you need to improve your English, I'm like, okay, great. Let me go do that, go to California, and then I'll be back. And so that's what happened. I spent 8 months in California and went back and interviewed again, and then started flying for Lufthansa. And yeah.
Wow.
So in that time in California, I learned a lot of things. Obviously, I learned, my English. I learned a lot of English. And interestingly, I don't know, do you ever watch soap operas in English?
Yes, a couple,
And
yes.
there was
To learn English, I watched soap operas.
Right? It's a great way to learn a language.
Yes.
There was this one show that I would watch, something, I don't know if it was General Hospital, something like that, but it's a great way to learn like expressions and how people interact
Yes.
and respond in different ways. And I thought that was very helpful, other than just
Yes.
being totally immersed in the language too, of course,
Yes.
And
That was one of my professors, and my English teachers. He said that we needed to watch English soap operas in English, or American soap operas, if we wanted to learn how to um, be more fluent in our conversations and more like normal day-to-day conversations.
yeah. And the expression.
Hi, I'm very happy to know you are here watching our podcast today. It is an honor to be featuring so many entrepreneurs on the journeys of their inside voice, their accent that is not an accident. And we want to reach out more people like you who are creating a better world of diversity, inclusiveness, equity, and belonging. So please take a moment to hit the subscribe button below, like, and share to others. And even if you want to leave a comment, that'll be nice. Thank you for your support. And now back to the episode.
And the expressions they use, right? They're like, because I'm sure you found that too. Some expressions you have in Spanish too, but some you don't, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's
Yes. I still like my husband. My husband is from US too, and sometimes I tell him, we have a saying in Spanish, and I tell him, it's something about this, and he goes, "Oh, I think it's this thing."
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
sometimes he looks at me like, "No, I have no idea what you're talking
Yeah.
about."
Yeah. But it makes you think about your language and how you express things and how it compares to other languages, doesn't it?
Yes, it is amazing.
Yeah.
So
Really
you work for how long did you? I mean, working as a flight attendant, it opens you up to a wide range of cultures and diversity, because you are and in Lufthansa, so you were flying around the world, right?
Yeah. And yes, it does. It's always very like short snippets of culture, because you might have a day or two, sometimes a little more. But it does give you some insight, and makes you realize how good we had it and how different it is in other countries, and just different customs, and even just within Europe, you see more differences in the different countries than you ever see here in the US, from country to country. Like the toilets in France are very different than the toilets in Germany, and so that was interesting. And one thing I did when I'm doing my au pair time in California, I made a skydive because I wanted to just see if I had the guts to do it.
Yeah.
And I liked it so much that during my first vacation as a flight attendant, I went back to California to learn how to skydive. And then I bought a parachute and I traveled with it. I took it everywhere I went as a flight attendant. And so I was able to find the local drop zones, the skydiving places, and was then more immersed in the culture than I would have been just staying at the hotel. Right? If that makes sense. Because a hotel is a hotel is a hotel, and yes, when you go outside, it's different, but being able to go to some place where the locals are and interact with them, and then have them take me places or show me places that I wouldn't have normally been exposed to, that was really awesome.
Yes, that's one of the things that I like to talk here in the podcast is immerse with other cultures. And here in US, we have an immense advantage, which is you have so many cultures and so many people from different places, and they still kind of like put together their own festivals, and you can just go to those festivals, and you don't have to go abroad, you just have them there, and then experience the culture and see like the genuine behavior of the people when they are in their element, I will say.
Yeah.
So, yes, so it is. And then when I tell people, like for instance, people that go, like I'm not very fond of cruises, but it's okay. I like just rather fly to a place and then explore. But I tell people, when you go on a cruise, just try to explore where you're going if you have the time, and immerse yourself into the culture, not only the tours that they take you, but just go to a local restaurant or something that will give you a little bit of exposure to the cultures.
And off the beaten path, maybe, off the tourist tracks or something. Yes. I agree. I've never been on a cruise, so I can't speak to that, but go out there. And some people say, but it's scary. I don't know if I'm safe, but really the world is not a scary place. People are people, and you just use your street smarts. Like there are places in the US you shouldn't be wandering around in. Just, do the same thing in any other country,
Exactly.
and gut too. I think most people have a pretty good sense of when you meet somebody, can I trust him? Can I not trust him or her, And just the world is not a scary place. It's a big and beautiful place. Go out, explore it.
I love that. Yeah. You could not say it better. It is a wonderful place with beautiful people and beautiful cultures, and we're all different. That's what makes us so beautiful, the differences that we all have.
Right, and it makes life more interesting.
Yes.
And ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. I always like that. Like, I know my own stories. I don't need to be dwelling on those. I like other people's stories, you know. What do you do? Why do you do what you do?
Yes,
Where does that passion come from? You know?
exactly. Explore and be curious about others. And then going back to you, so you were a flight attendant, and then you made a jump to be an entrepreneur, but it was due to love. You found love.
Because of skydiving. It's so
Yes.
interesting. Sometimes the places, like when we do something, like I wanted to make one jump just to see if I was brave enough to do it. And then it turned me like into a whole different direction. I started skydiving, and then I met my husband during a skydiving vacation in Florida. I was a flight attendant.
Oh my goodness.
That's how we met in 𝗕𝗶𝗁𝗶𝗁𝗄, Florida, of all places. So
Yes, yes, I know that's where the skydiving is around here. Yes, in
yeah,
Zephyr Hills. Yes.
yeah. Yeah, so I met him there, and then we did, the whole long distance dating thing for a while, for a little over a year. And then we got married, and I moved over here. And it's so interesting. As a kid, I remember as a kid, I always wanted to live in a place that has palm trees and that was near the ocean. So here I am in Florida,
That
and
is that is excellent. That is beautiful because you fulfilled your dreams
yeah.
and you kind of like flew over all the fears and all the divisions and made yourself this has to be different, the world has to be different, and then you went out and looked for it,
Hmm.
and I love it. So now you're
And,
here with your children. You have three sons
mhm.
and your husband. When did you decide to get out of Lufthansa or
Well, when I got married, he is American. So when I got married and I moved over here, I couldn't work for Lufthansa anymore because,
okay?
yeah, that would have been too much of a commute. And so I quit there and I started. He's a manager of a place that builds parachutes. And so I started working there as soon as I got the green card and all of that. I started working with him and, some of the production logistics, and then later got into marketing and all of that. But when I moved over here, he said, why don't you, because we would go jump all every weekend to some drop zone. And he said, why don't you start a business selling parachute equipment? And so I'm like, really? I can just do that? In Germany, it's not as easy to start a business as it is here.
Yeah,
And also, at least back then, it might have changed now. The mindset is different, Not as many people think, oh, I could just start a business. It is here, and here in like they teach it even in some schools. They have some business classes or entrepreneur classes. They talk about it,
yeah.
In Germany, the mindset's very different. So when he suggested that, I was really surprised and like, okay, so that was the first business I ever started, was skydiving equipment business. And I had that while we lived in Miami that first year, and then we moved up here to Central Florida. And now I lost track of the question. What were you asking me? Sorry.
So it was basically you're answering it because I said how was the transition between moving to Lufthansa to become an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and then having your
So
children.
yeah. So I had a full-time job at first with the parachute company, but then also did that on the side on the weekends. So that was the first business I had, and I've had several over the years. And so 4 years after we got married, I had my first son, Chris. I now have three sons. He's turning 30 this year, and not sure how he feels about that. But so yeah, three sons, and we raised them. We traveled a lot, homeschooled them, and we traveled a lot because I just think that was also a very new idea. My husband came home one day and he said, "What do you think about homeschooling?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because in Germany, I think it's either the only or one of the few countries where it's illegal to do that.
Oh,
And yeah, And so I had never heard of the concept of homeschooling your kids. And I'm like, how can you not send your kids to school, right? And
Yes.
so, but then I started researching it and talking to people and reading about it. And the more I read and the more sense it made to me, and the more I liked the idea. And, you know, the freedom it gave us to travel too. I like that aspect of it. So all three were homeschooled, and not even in the very traditional sense. It was a lot of like free flowing and following their interests and all of that. And so we spent, you know, a bit of time in Germany and a lot of time in Costa Rica because I wanted them to learn Spanish
Okay.
and talk about immersion. That was really cool. We always stayed in a very small village with a local family, and the kids would we'd have some classes in the morning, and then they would go outside and play with the local kids. They'd play soccer in the field, and they would go play marbles at somebody's house, and the floor was just a dirt floor, and, you know, different than it is here. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was wonderful times in Costa Rica. We had many
Yeah.
times, and I don't know how much Spanish they picked up, but I'm sure they could pick it up fairly easily because they spent so much time there.
With the little
Yeah,
ones, with the
yeah,
other, yes. And then children make it very easy and find it very easy to communicate with each other, even if
yeah,
they don't speak the same language.
yeah.
Yeah,
They find ways.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. They
yeah,
find ways. They don't have anything blocking them
yeah,
from moving forward, which is beautiful. That is us as an adult, as adults, that we create those blocks and those.
yeah, yeah. We had an interesting experience with them. One year we had two boys here from France. They only spoke French. My kids spoke English and German, but they resorted to Spanish because the French kids spoke some Spanish because they grew up close to the Spanish border. So
Yes,
somehow they figured, and they had grandparents that spoke German. So somehow between all those languages, they figured it out and they communicated and had a great time together, you know, for 4 weeks or however long they were here. And they're not
yes,
as embarrassed about making mistakes or some as we are as grown-ups, you know?
exactly. Yes, yes. We
Yeah.
are not. They're not judgmental. They're
Yeah.
children are very pure love. Um,
Yeah.
what we are
And
made of. Yes,
yes, and curious, you know, and they just
yes,
want to communicate.
yes, and welcoming it.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's beautiful. So then, then I understand the parachute that you have there. But then you kept on going, and you moved. You are in Florida. You are immersed. You have your three kids, and what what brought you to start writing books?
Yeah, I had no intentions of writing books. I had always, like you said in the introduction, I always had my camera with me everywhere I went from an early age and loved taking photos. And my sister-in-law lives in California in a small town. She works at an art gallery. And one day she says to me, if you ever want to show your photos, you could exhibit them here in the gallery. So I did that and visited there, and I saw a coloring book that a local artist had created from his photos. He had taken the sites of that little town, turned them into coloring pages, put Zentangle patterns or something behind it, and sold it as an adult coloring book. And I thought, that's a really cute idea. I would love to do that for DeLand, where I've now been for over 30 years. And, you know, it was just a fun project. And so when I came back here, I just jumped right into it. I made it the places I think that should be in it. I reached out to everybody, to the people at those places, because I wanted to make sure I got their permission that they were okay to be in the book. But I also wanted to hear a little bit more information from them about that site or the business or whatever it was, because I wanted to have some text in the book so people knew what they were coloring. So that's how that whole concept got started. And that was 6 years ago. and I published the first book about the land. And I had so much fun in the process, meeting all these people and hearing their stories, that I just continued and kept going. I did one for New Smyrna and Mount Dora. And yeah, and then I thought I would like to do a book about Berlin, my hometown. But it was like there's so much history in Berlin, it could fill books, and
Yes.
then like, I have to focus on something. So I decided to focus on Berlin during the Cold War. What was that like, and the different sites and stuff. And that year I had also signed up for a speaking event here in Daytona. They have something called Elevate Daytona. They host it every year, and it's a TED style talk, but you only have 5 minutes, and you have to have 20 slides that change every 15 seconds. So you really have to stay focused and on track. So I could pick the topic. And again, it was one of those things I wanted to do just to overcome my fear of public speaking, because it's not something I typically sign up for voluntarily. And I'm like, 5 minutes, I can do that. I can talk about what I want to talk about. And I just signed up. And then every day between signing up and the event, I'm like, how can I get out of this? Do I really want to do this? I was so scared. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. But that talk became about, that year was the 30th anniversary of the fall of the wall. So I talked about that, growing up in West Berlin and then experiencing the fall of the wall, what that was like. And so that was, a scary experience, but really good. It has since then opened a lot of doors. I just got a call yesterday from somebody who had listened to that, but that's a different story. Anyway, so it's the book about Berlin, and then began realizing it's very difficult creating books and selling them and making money. Because the bookstores or Amazon, like you sell a book for $15, you get $1 and maybe $2. That's it. So unless you sell millions, it's not a good way to support yourself.
Yes.
So at that point, then I had started going to chamber meetings and things like that, and realized maybe we could do something. Maybe we can work with business. They kept asking me, could we do something? Could we do a coloring book? And so then we transitioned into being a marketing company rather than just a publishing company. And we started creating little explainer coloring books that businesses use as marketing tools. Here's one that a local beautician did. She wanted to talk about hair and her experience with, challenging hair. Let's just call it that. And so there's text that explains it, and then there's an image to go with what you're doing. And then there's always the benefits of coloring, because obviously coloring is not just for kids, it's a huge movement, and it's very good for your mental state. And then there's always an about us page and a contact us, you can put a QR code in it. And so we now have created, I think, about 40 books. We're going on 40 books since I first started with the DeLange coloring book. It just kind of happened. I followed that and my, learning from what I experienced in the early days.
Yes. Beautiful. I love that. I love the concept. I love the books, and just how everything was flowing for you, as far as how things showed up for you. It was like meant to be.
Yeah, it does feel like it, but you have to be able to listen to what shows up for you and see the signs and be open for that,
Yes.
And yes, see which way it kind of wants to take you. So
now that people know what you are doing now and how you can help them, how can they find you, Bibi?
Well, we have a website, culturetocolor.com, and we have social media, under that same name, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. and then on Facebook, of course. And just email me, bibi@culture2color.com, BIBI@culture2color.com. That's how they find me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see your colored images if you ever color one of the books. And yeah, would love to hear from you.
Absolutely wonderful. I love the way that you're explaining your life, the way that, you know, everything flew, and then how you, ever since you were little, wanted to explore other places. And also the way that you explained to us, this is how I grew up. I didn't know anything different until I knew something different.
Mhm.
And this is a beautiful story. Thank you so much, Bibi, for being with us today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. I do too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Is there a last thought that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yes. Go visit your families as you can. Go travel the world because you can. Go live your dreams because you can.
Oh, amen to that.
Right? This is,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
this is what life is all about.
exactly. And thank you so much for being here with us today. To our audience, remember, you came to this world because you were loved, to be loved and love one another. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi, it's Maritza here. If you like this episode of My Accent is No Accident podcast and would like to listen more like this, subscribe wherever you're listening to it or watching it. Leave us a nice review and share with your friends, family, and network. Thanks for listening.